Hello, everyone. Welcome to Caspian podcast, discussing the impact of women leaders. Caspian Debt provides customized collateral-free debt to professionally managed MSMEs and startups. Our guests for the evening are two fearless women leaders in their respective fields. Please welcome our first guest, Mrs. Padmaja Ruparel, co-founder at Indian Angel Network. She, an entrepreneur and angel investor, is today the president of Indian Angel Network, building it from just a gleam in the eye to India's first and Asia's largest group of business angels, comprising the who's who of successful entrepreneurs and dynamic CEOs from India and overseas. She has established a unique model of an incubator based on domain expertise and mentoring portfolio. As a key player in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of India, she operationalized the TIE Universe's best chapter, TIE Delhi chapter, and revived the Indian Venture Capital Association, India's oldest and largest association of VC and PE firms, as CFO of the organization. She paints and piano take Padmaja to a different realm. She was also listed as one of the most powerful women in by Business Today. The conversation will be aided by our second guest, Mrs. Ragini Chaudhary, Director Investments, Caspian. Mrs. Ragini is a development finance professional with more than 20 years of experience in microfinance, impact investment, and mainstreaming gender financing. She leads the finance and fundraising team in Caspian Debt. She is a postgraduate from Institute of Rural Management, Anand, and is a management accountant from CIMA UK and a certified executive coach. A very warm welcome to all of you, and over to you, Ragini.
Thanks, Padmaja. I think we can spend whole 45 minutes describing your achievements. So yeah, really pleasure to have you in our as our guest. We have some of our team members listening on today from the office. But as you're aware, this will also go on our social media. So really grateful to have you here. And you know, given your you know the background that you have of being in investment industry early on, could you look at your life and career and tell us what have been your defining some of your defining moments?
So first of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me to the Caspian platform. I truly believe Caspian, and I haven't had a chance to interact with Caspian as an organization, with many of the team members, as well as yourself, of course, Ragini. I do believe that Caspian is a very empathetic investor and really appreciate that. So thank you for creating something which is very needed and very valuable to the ecosystem. The second, before I continue, I'm in conversation with somebody who's been a coach. So many of you who are listening, you now know who coaches me. So it's a great opportunity to be conversing with somebody who probably thinks a little ahead of me and then cleans up behind me. So thank you, Ragini, for many years of friendship that you've shared. So it's a very difficult question because I don't see life and career, I see life and life. And if I see it like that, then for me, every day is a day to do something, be it at home, be it in family, right? Be it in my social circles, or be it in my so-called professional life, because you are not defined by either or you're defined by both, right? And the one impinges on the other, but one also value adds to the other. So to me, life and career is not two different things. Having said that, I think each one of us have, as we've traversed the path of a few decades, and especially where black becomes gray and then white, I think you look back and you think about it. I think for me, there were two very, very defining moments. One defining moment was when I joined a very early stage software services company, especially in the when software services was a sunrise industry. I think I didn't know then, I should say that. But when I look back today, it has been one of the most defining moments in my life, because it brought me in close to working with somebody who is now my mentor for over 30 years, right? So if I say it in a very pithy term, with no disrespect, is that I have changed companies, but unfortunately or fortunately have not changed a boss. So for me, I think that that one day when I went for my interview and decided to join the company, I think for me, I little did I know that that would be the moment when my course of life changed. And I think what really excited me about saying yes, though I was in another job just a month ago, which I had joined, was the excitement of joining at that time a very young company. That time we didn't have a word called startups. It was also, I think, the ability of talking to people who were thinking ahead. It came through. And the third was, which was really a bet I took, to be honest, to say that I could grow into doing things both both vertically, to grow myself vertically as well as horizontally, pun intended, right? And through the years, what has worked out, that both worked, right? So I also feel with that as much as you think you're going to chart your life, it is not in your hands. But what is in your hands is how you chart your life, in a sense that how you interact, how humane, empathetic you are, how true you are to what you're doing. And that does help you to bring, at least it did to me, to help me to bring me closer to what I would say not only good people, that is fortunate, but I think what was really something that I think I did right was good minds, people who were thinking ahead. So that was one defining moment. The other defining moment was that when I was somewhere in 2004, I think, again, there was an opportunity to invest in a young startup in oil and gas. uh, I said, paise lagate, sort of let's bet. And that bet worked for me. It gave me 27 times in less than 24 months. And the reason it was a defining moment is a year later, we founded IEN. But that whetted my appetite that there's a different way of building your professional life. There's different things that you can do and yet have fun. And I think that to me was kind of a nudge and a push that I didn't know would define my next decade and a half and more.
Sure. And Padmaja, you've seen several leaders, as a part of IN network, and now, and also you have seen women leaders. So do women leader bring something different to the table as per your experience, knowledge?
So I think there are two pieces here, right? I think because we have an innate sense of multitasking, because we have a mandatory need to multitask. Okay. There is no reason why we have to, but uh, you want to also pick the battles that you want to fight, right? So you don't want to be an idealist, you want to be a practical, because if you're an idealist, to a great extent you are going to be standing at the same place. The cause may go ahead, so you need to take that call in life. Nothing is right or nothing is wrong in life. You just need to take a call in life. So if you want to progress in doing what you want to do, even if it is sitting at home, right? You want to even there do things at home. It's quite okay. Then you have to be able to be a multitask, because without that, you're not going to be able to move. And in my little experience, I've seen women being able to, I sit on a couple of boards now, and I've seen women discussions where men said, okay, do this first, do this second, do this third. And I would say, yeah, that's a great idea, but you're duplicating effort, right? Between item number 1 and 2. Why don't you think of something that you pull the data in such a way that you're actually focused on two different objectives that you need to come on? And that kind of thinking brings a different level of efficiency and productivity. That's number one. I think the second point is men being men, and I have a lot of respect for them, because I think uh, they occupy half the world. They are 4 billion. Let's be very clear on that. But I think they're sequential thinkers, and in that thinking, they do get lost in the clinicality of it. I think we, as God has created us, has created a kind of warmth and a sensitivity, and you don't want to bury it when you are in a life outside of home. You want to leverage it when you're on a life outside your home. So you don't have to be a different person at home and a different person outside of home, right? And I think that sensitivity and warmth can bring a lot of value to, let's say, companies or boards or teams, whatever you may be doing, by bringing both empathy, just being a little more sensitive, and and now with a lot of women in the workforce, there are a lot of issues that women have which they just don't find it comfortable to talk to men. Just being there gives a lot of sense of comfort to the larger crowd.
Now, I want to come to, your core area, which is investing, which you've been doing for several years before women, before anybody thought that women could invest. So if you see 2023, of course, we are in a post-pandemic world. But we've also had a lot of setbacks, which have really questioned, the kind of trust, the kind of that you place on any founder or you investor, because in a very early stage, you're actually taking a bet on the founding team. And what in the startup world has been shaken by some of the things that have happened with Go Mechanic, Bajaj, and there are several such things. So how do you think investors will come out of this? How are they dealing with all these changes? And of course, the challenge of post-pandemic world in any case is, very chaotic and volatile.
Yeah, so I think number one, I want to make a point here that Baiju's is not, or Go Mechanic is no longer a quote unquote startup. It's a large company. Okay.
Right.
And they are leaders in what they are doing, in whichever sector they are doing.
Correct.
Governance issues, let me call it out. Governance issues is not only on these companies, which were once a startup. Okay. We have seen major frauds happening in companies like Satya, for example. I'm just taking a name, right? And it was from a very different IT industry and a different era, about what, 10, 12 years ago, whatever that was. So governance issues are not new. Governance issues are not going to stop here. Let me be very honest. As much as people think that we are going to put a stop, it's not going to happen, because the reality is that there are people and there are people, and they will have different intents. So if there is an entrepreneur whose intent is not to walk the right path, the path of integrity, there is little you and I can do. I mean, I know, and and we all know in history that there are children whose parents were very keen they walked the path of integrity, and they didn't. right? And they've been some of the biggest fraudsters in history. So to me, this is not something which is just related to startup ecosystem, even if I include Bajaj and Go Mechanics, and there are others for that matter. So we need to understand that this is not an issue of just this industry. This has been happening over the ages. It has happened and happening in other industries, and it will continue to happen because this is not. At the end of the day, you keep peeling the onion. At the end, you will have nothing but a word called trust, right? And there's no onion after that to peel. So let's park that aside. The issue which is more important is how well were the frameworks of governance put in, embedded, how were they implemented, how were they, sort of checked out, right? How were they monitored? I mean, surely there is a problem if a company has not done 2 years, not got audits done for 2 years, haven't filed their accounts. Number one issue is what was the board doing, right? What were the auditors doing? Resigning 2 years later is really crying over spilt milk in some ways. Number two is between the 2 years of no accounts being finalized and reported, how come somebody invested? Where was the diligence? What happened to the diligence, right? So there are a lot of questions which seem to be very, very obvious, which have been sort of brushed under the carpet. Now, that is not what the startup ecosystem is about. Let's be very clear about it. 99% of the startups are not working like that. They are putting their blood, sweat, tears, and hours of sleepless nights to make sure they're building not only a strong foundation company, but they're trying their level best to ensure all compliances, all governances, they're trying to do the right things, right? And that is something we tend to forget in this whole noise about 2 or 3 companies, which is very, very unfair. But if that's happened, I think what we have done at IEN and what I think a lot of others are doing, I'm sure, is that we're reviewing our governance processes, not only ours, but the governance processes of the companies as well. That how are you tightening it? How often are you getting checks done? Do you have an internal auditor after a certain stage of company? Are we getting, I ask my team, are we getting compliance certificates from the companies? Are we cross-checking on different portals that they've done on their filings? Are the audit reports? Are we speaking to the auditors to say, are there any issues in the company? I mean, there are lots and tons of things to do. Let's not get away from that. But if we don't do it as investors, if we don't do it as board directors, if we don't do it as CEOs and senior management, and if we don't do it as auditors, then I don't think there's anyone else to blame but us. But again, I want to re-emphasize, this is not a malaise of the startup ecosystem. It is a malaise that has been there for a long time, not only in companies, but let's be very honest, even in people. And when we invest, we are investing in people. There's nothing else to really invest in, right? So we have to take a lot more effort and time and energy to diligence the guy. So we are making 20 phone calls to find out. We are talking to 20 people to figure out who is he, who's the real Mr. A, right? What has been his track record? What are his relationships? How has he behaved with his mentors or advisors in the past? How has he handled his clients if he was working elsewhere? How has he handled his earlier team members? How has his ex-boss feel? All of those things make for that essential, because that's the person who's going to put in the governance structures. The governance structures are not going to come parachuting from up there.
No, that is really, really useful. What I'm taking away with this is that it's not okay to call entire startup ecosystem as something that which doesn't have governance, but there are there are things that investors themselves can do and other ecosystem enablers can do to strengthen governance practices, is what I'm taking away from this. So thank you so much for that. So in terms of, you have this track record of investing, you are on the verge of even setting up a new fund. What are the opportunities you are seeing in the Indian ecosystem today where you are sitting now?
Oh, I was chatting with somebody about an hour ago, and the we were just talking about our new fund. He says there's no issue on getting investment opportunities. Investment opportunities abound in this country here in India, and we are looking. What is critical, however, is we are looking for two things, right? We are looking for propositions or companies which have solutions, innovative or disruptive solutions, which are solving real problems, right? Water, sanitation, space, agri, cyber, clean energy, clean tech, whatever, fintech, education, or whatever you take, right? We want real problems solved. Second, we're looking for companies which are building a top line and have a sharp eye on the bottom line. Okay. At some point, the bottom line has to start going north. It doesn't work if it keeps going south. We're not going to invest in such companies. And you can assess as well as inculcate that very early in the journey. Third, we're looking for a very, very large target market for the company. Because if there is not a large customer base, then as an equity investor, it makes it very difficult for us to return monies. And finally, and the most important to us, is the founding team. Are they people who have got enough in them to build the business without our money? Okay. Are they convinced that they want to do this with their backs against the walls? Do they understand what they're doing? Have they really spoken to customers and got their proposition really tweaked? Are they leaders? That because they have to build a team underneath, right? And are they able to sell? Are they salesmen at the end of the day? Because if they can't sell, they can't do any of the others. They can't recruit, they can't bring vendors, they can't collect, they can't sell to customers, nothing. So I think we look for these five things. And if these five things are there, then to a great extent, we would have moved 80% of the way.
And are you finding these opportunities? Are there sectors where you find them more? Are there sectors which are still sort of struggling? What is your sense of the market out there?
I think there are new sectors opening up. For instance, for sure, space tech has opened up. We are seeing electronics, manufacturing tech, hardware opening up. I think spaces that are there are still the SaaS plays there. Remember, it's a very risk mitigated revenue model, right? You can almost have an annualized run rate through the SaaS model. So for an investor, that's an interesting model rather than a constant customer acquisition model. I think the second thing that we are seeing is a lot of focus on issues like water, sanitation, cleaning the rivers, all of that, which is very interesting. We didn't see that earlier. And I think post-pandemic, to be honest, Ragini, the entire healthcare biotech has grown. There was a lot of amplification post-pandemic, and I think we saw a deal flow of about 30% or so, literally tripled our deal flow in this space. But believe me, even today, it hasn't gone down, right? We're still getting 25-30%, which is not bad. People don't talk about it as much. But good thing that has happened is we are seeing some very interesting pharma, biotechs, space companies, med devices, all of that happening in India. The issue is that India does not have the growth money in these sectors. So that's the challenge, next challenge as I see it. I think what Dr. Devi Shetty told us, he's on our advisory board, is very, very true. It's worked out absolutely perfectly. He said the pandemic has ensured that the infrastructure of 80% of the infrastructure of hospitals will be utilized for IPD. Okay, the rest is going to be largely admin and labs, which really means that the OPD has moved to homes, and therefore all the DIY price efficient med devices that we are all seeing. How many of us really knew that there was an oximeter, which we all had at home? How many of us today have oxygen concentrators? You'll be surprised at how many people have it today, right? So I think the OPD is moving offline, and I'm sorry, moving home. And the second thing I think is a lot of technology or smart devices are getting embedded in the IPD sector.
Very interesting. And, with your new fund, you are meeting a new, different kind of investors. So do you see any change in the kind of investors you had in your previous fund to this fund? Is anything changing there? One, of course, stark thing that is coming up is that the lines between impact investors and regular VCs sort of blurring. You're talking about the same issues which impact investors talk about, like water, sanitation, health. This has become like climate has become sort of critical. But do you see any difference in the investors which are coming up now, or they're still
So
looking for the similar things?
one point, which just to continue your point on impact, I think there's a huge focus on ESG governance and frameworks and implementation and quantification and all of that. To my mind, a little overdone, but there is that. Okay, a lot of institutional investors want this. I think the second piece, which is also very interesting, there are investors, institutional investors, who are running the process, not necessarily wanting now to add too much, how should I say, engage too much post investment, as long as you do what is required to be done as a fund manager. On the other hand, I think our LPs are sort of getting very interested in doing co-investments or next round investments, right? Which was not there in our fund one as much. The issue that we have is everybody wants to co-invest with us, and the problem is if we give everybody a piece of the round, then there won't be much left for the fund itself. So we are having to draw some hard lines there.
Yeah.
But next round, yes, of course, we'd love to open it up to LPs, provided, of course, it works. I think the third thing is that the social media leverage has really increased. So your persona on social media is almost becoming more important than what we did in Fund One, where I think your persona in the print media was much more. I mean, it's inverse. You have to still do both, but it's sort of inverse. In the last piece, I think, which is unfortunate, if I may say so, is the compliance ecosystem has become much stricter from the regulators. To my mind, I don't mind what they're doing as long as they're not stifling innovation and creativity, because especially early stage, there's so much of art and science in it, right? So you don't want those frameworks which will, how should I say, which sort of cages people in rather than allowing them to flourish. And that's visible, right? A lot of companies are flipping. That's why.
Right. No. But very, very valid points on how things are changing. It's sort of almost like you're giving us a summary of evolution of investment industry in itself. So that's so valuable, Padmaja. So is there any book, any quote which sort of has inspired you, which you think women can gain from, or, or they should look up, or anything that you can?
I'll be very honest. Every book I've read, I've learned something from it. Every time I read a good book, hey, this is a great quote, and I forget about it, right? But when I am in the midst of something in life, or I'm doing something, or I'm at a crossroad, or I have to take a decision, that's the time when I think about what I have read, and it sort of needs to flash into you,
Right.
because there are so many wise people who've been around for centuries, I think everybody has something that you can learn from, right? It's impossible for me to remember. But I think more important to me is to read, and it goes away somewhere. Our brains are like it's the smallest thing, but it takes in so much.
So much.
I think the retrieval system has to be efficient, that you call it when you need it and not otherwise. So, a long answer to a short question, I don't have a quote which sort of helps me, but it helps me whenever I need it.
Oh, that's wonderful. But you do advise that people to read and absorb.
Oh, yes.
So this has been amazing, Padmaja. Thank you so much for your very frank and sometimes very different views from what one is used to hearing. So we many thanks for that, because we do need different perspectives. I really like your enthusiasm about the next stage of companies that will come and next stage of leaders that will come. But we are very thankful for the time that you spent with us.
Thank you
And
very, very much, Ragini. Again, as I said, thank you to you, thank you to Caspian, and hope we do more together and build
yes,
more.
yes. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye.